Brantford-Brant.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to begin by thanking the member for Carleton, the leader of His Majesty's official opposition, and Canada's next great Prime Minister for sharing his time with me today on such a prominent issue our country is facing. As always, it's a privilege to speak on behalf of the residents of Brantford-Brant. As we are all aware, the topic of foreign interference in this country has not only been at the forefront of discussions in this House for quite some time now, but it remains a top concern for Canadians across this country, as these foreign operatives pose major threats to the safety and security of our democratic institutions. The fact that this interference was able to grow this extensively under this Prime Minister's watch, and that it took this long for Beijing agents in this country to be expelled, speaks loudly to this government's complete incompetence in fulfilling its basic duty to protect Canadians. It is unacceptable that this government has known that MPs and their families have been targeted by the communist regime in Beijing for almost 3 years and took zero measures to inform those members of this House. That is, until they were exposed on the front pages of our press.
Exactly.
If the government knew that the foreign operatives are using their diplomatic status to conduct foreign interference operations, they should have dealt with those individuals immediately, not years down the line when they were embarrassed because of inaction. Regardless of your political color, we all as members must work to fulfill our duties to represent our constituents and to honor the democratic process that brought us here in the first place. The fact that the communist regime in Beijing was targeting the former leader of the Conservative Party not only shows that they were working to re-elect the Prime Minister's government and defeat Conservatives, but that the responsibilities of being a democratically elected member of Parliament serves absolutely no meaning to members on that side of the House. Today we are debating the opposition motion moved by the NDP. The NDP, a party of Twitter warriors who care about Canadians on social media and defend the Prime Minister and this Liberal government every step of the way. They can heckle me all they want, Madam Speaker.
Order, 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 order. 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 There will be 5 minutes of questions and comments. I would ask members to wait until there's questions and comments. And again, it's not respectful. I don't care what party it is, who is making the comments. We see it from everyone in the House, not from everyone, but from all parties, and I would just ask members to please be respectful when someone else has the floor. The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
So to really emphasize my point about how they talk out of both sides of the mouth, let's take a look at their history. 2020, when we as Conservatives were pushing for a study on the weed charity scandal and creating an anti-corruption committee, the NDP voted with the Liberals against it. In 2021, they helped the Liberal government to shut down any public debates regarding the Winnipeg lab documents that were also linked, coincidentally, to the communist regime in Beijing. In 2022, they blindly supported the Prime Minister to invoke the Emergencies Act. In 2023, when the Conservatives called for Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff and most trusted political advisor, to testify on foreign election interference, they filibustered for almost 24 hours and voted with the Liberals against it. And now, after the release of the so-called special rapporteur report, when Conservatives were working to get Mr. Johnston to appear before committee to answer on his failure to recommend a public inquiry, again the NDP showed its true colors and siding with the Liberals and voting together to try and silence the opposition and hide the truth from Canadians. Now, 19 sitting days before the summer break, the NDP is trying to save what is left of their political legacy by presenting a motion that will once again recommend that the government do things differently, and then will vote blindly again against their own very motion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hypocrisy at its finest. Madam Speaker, foreign operatives should never be permitted to intimidate and harass Canadian people on Canadian soil, as this government has allowed for several years. Rather than following the response of our neighbours across the border who shut down promptly these police stations and charged those responsible, this Prime Minister and the Minister for Public Safety instead chose to spend their energy on misleading Canadians. First, the Minister said the stations were all shut down. Then we find out that they're still in operation in Montreal, and now most recently the Minister comes clean and admits that there may be more illegal police stations run by Beijing across this country. Worse now, we've learned that the government has been providing funding to these groups, taxpayer funding designed to implode our democracy.
Wow.
As reported by the National Post, Centre Sino Quebec, one of 2 Quebec organizations that are under investigation by the RCMP for allegedly hosting a secret Chinese police station, was given nearly $160,000 worth of funds. The solution is not difficult, Madam Speaker. It is very simple. Shut down all of these police stations and create and implement now a foreign influence registry to protect Canadians. Canadians have no idea what to believe at this point, and who can blame them? Thus, the need for an open and honest public inquiry on foreign interference in this country is imperative to give citizens of this country the answers they so heavily deserve. Unfortunately, we all know very well the government's lack of action did not stop there. Rather, the Prime Minister showed his true colors when he chose to place his partisan interests above the safety of our institutions and the safety of this country by selecting a family friend and member of the Beijing-funded Trudeau Foundation. He knowingly appointed his family friend, his ski buddy, his cottage neighbor, and member of the Beijing-funded foundation to this fake job intended to legitimize this Liberal cover-up. As well stated by Canada's next Prime Minister, in a country of 40 million people, we could not find, or at least the government could not find, anyone that had not had connections to the Liberal Party or been on the foundation. That is unbelievable, remarkable. We have so many distinguished, prominent Canadians with the same credentials as our former Governor General David Johnston, and they ignored each and every one of those individuals and handpicked Mr. Johnston for the job. To make matters worse, while working on the report and during the investigation, he got advice from another trusted Liberal advisor, Sheila Block, a Liberal supporter who donated thousands of dollars exclusively to the Liberal Party of Canada. And if that's not enough, we have another layer of the cover-up cake. When David Johnston wanted to make sure he wasn't in a conflict of interest in judging the Beijing's interference in the Prime Minister and the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, guess whose opinion he sought? We have all kinds of retired Supreme Court justices in this country who are still alive. But he had to choose Mr. Frank Iacobacci of the Supreme Court of Canada, a member of the Trudeau Foundation.
Wow.
As a lawyer, I am absolutely gobsmacked and astounded that they cannot see this runaway freight train called the conflict of interest running smack dab in the middle of the heart of this Liberal government. It's not only pure, active, 1 minute, thank you. It's not only pure, active conflict of interest, it's the appearance of interest. And any lawyer who goes into court knows that there have been so many judges who've completely recused themselves on such lower grounds of having anything to do that might compromise the integrity of the process. This process has been substantially compromised by the actions of David Johnston and this Prime Minister and his government. In conclusion, sunshine is the best disinfectant as per CSIS. Let the public see. Let's let the public be the judge. Let's call a public inquiry. If the NDP really want to prove that they support a public inquiry, they must tell the Prime Minister that they will pull out of their coalition agreement if he does not call one. Stand up for Canadians, NDP.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Well, first, it is New Democrats that are bringing forward this motion today, Madam Speaker, and we are standing up for Canadians. Madam Speaker, no, we know the Conservatives, they're really more interested in flinging mud than looking for a solution. This is a matter of foreign interference, not just Chinese interference, Madam Speaker. Russia and Iran are also carrying out major covert operations. We only have to look at the United States in 2016 for evidence or to reports of Russian financing of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa in 2022, which we know the Conservatives supported. But by singling out the Chinese, this is having a huge impact on the diaspora here in Canada. Do the Conservatives agree with Canadians that we should be investigating all foreign interference in elections? And also, do they agree that we need to deal with foreign interference before we go into another election, Madam Speaker, not after?
Again, I'm hearing individuals speak out of turn. I would ask them to please hold off. I know it's difficult, but I'm sure that they can do it. The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his question. It had many layers to it, so I'll try my best to respond to it. Perhaps he's not aware that for the past year and a half, I was a sitting member of the Standing Joint Committee to review the Emergencies Act declaration. And I would encourage my colleague to actually confer with his colleague, the member for Hamilton Centre, an NDP colleague, who will easily debunk everything that he had to say with respect to the element of Russian interference, with respect to the funding. We had experts who testified at committee who completely debunked that particular narrative. That was shared with the House numerous times. So I'd recommend that you talk to your colleague. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, it's somewhat disappointing to see the shameful behaviour of members opposite when they take personal character assassinations as someone as distinguished as David Johnston. It is important to recognize, Madam Speaker, that David Johnston was in fact a Stephen Harper appointment. That's right. And if you want to get a sense of the integrity of Mr. Johnston, I would suggest to you, read what it is that Mr. Harper had to say about Mr. Johnston. And if you want to get even a better sense, all you have to do is read what David Christopherson said in committee of Prague. And unfortunately, what we are witnessing is a shameful behavior of character assassination of a distinguished Canadian, and I say shame on the members opposite that are choosing to take this course. My question to the member is, where was the Conservative Party when there is foreign interference being applied here in Canada while Stephen Harper and the leader of the Conservative Party had the reins of power? Nowhere.
The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Madam Speaker, David Johnston sacrificed himself and his reputation to preserve the reputation and career of this Prime Minister. He is not the first, probably won't be the last friend of the Prime Minister who has sacrificed his reputation to preserve the reputation of the Prime Minister and this government. Let's all remember our former Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Jody Wilson-Raybould. Let's remember our former Minister of Health, Jane Philpott. Let's remember our former Minister of Finance, Bill Morneau. Now, according to the government, just random liberals. That's all they are. Not senior ministers, random liberals. And to make
sorry, I have a point of order. The honourable member for l'honorable député de Repentigny. C'est-tu avec?
The honourable member for Repentigny. Well, the question is that it seems that when the gentleman speaks, there's a sort of a frying sound on the line, and it's very hard for the interpreters to interpret. So perhaps something can be done about the sound.
So I'm not sure if there is a cell phone near the microphone or something that might be causing some. Okay, so I would ask, I've asked this before of members, is to please ensure that the cell phones are not close to, are not really sitting on your desk, because it's creating some interference with interpretation. The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
From the top, please.
No, sorry. I think if he can just wrap it up, because I do have time for a brief question.
Yeah. The tail end of my response, Madam Speaker, thank you, was in addition to those random Liberals, we have our former Privy Council clerk, Michael Warnock, okay, who was also sacrificed to preserve the legacy of this Prime Minister, and of course, a trusted friend, a political advisor, and his principal secretary, Mr. Gerald Butts.
On a le temps pour une brève question.
We have time for a brief question.
Question? I just can't see who's behind there. Okay, the honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies. Brief question.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the question, I want to turn it back towards the opposition motion, which comes from the NDP, which might give the impression that they've found some courage to actually oppose this particular government. Right. But I guess I would like to ask the member a simple question. Does he believe that this newfound courage will continue? Because we expect them to stand with us and oppose this government and bring them down. Bring down an absolute corrupt government. Does he expect this newfound courage to continue?
A very brief answer. The honourable for Brantford-Brant.
I'm forever the optimist, Madam Speaker, and I hope that my NDP colleagues have listened very carefully to the speeches so far on this side of the House. And as I indicated at the end of my speech, I hope they will put their constituents and this country first before propping up this absolute corrupt Liberal government. Thank you.